Hello and welcome to this video where we'll be replacing an adjustment assembly in a MAG-9000. Now when you purchase the parts at Magna-Matic.com, you'll be able to buy them in two different ways. We have a full kit where all of the parts are included together along with a new crank handle if you're in need of that, or you can of course buy them individually. The 9000-37 thrust bearings, the 9000-16 threaded rod, and the 9000-08 nylon adjustment nut. The hardware and cotter pin are included with the threaded rod. So let's get started.
The first step is to take off the grit guard. You can simply do this by turning the plastic knob. When removing the grinding wheel, you may need to adjust it up higher to provide clearance to get the wheel off. Do remember, the arbor nut is a left-handed thread, and if your wheel has been on for some time or is very tight, you may need to use the arbor wrench in addition to the spanner wrench. Next, we'll remove the rear cover of the MAG-9000. While this is not absolutely necessary, it does make access and seeing inside of the machine a little easier. In the next step, we'll be removing the crank handle, which is simply loosening a set screw in the base of the crank and taking it off the threaded rod. Now we will have to take off the two 3/8 nuts using two 9/16 wrenches. The two nuts are jammed together, so we first need to unjam them before we can take them off the threaded rod. And now inside the machine we have a view of the spring that keeps tension on the adjustment. Use the extended needle nose pliers to unhook the spring from the top of the motor bracket. There's a small hole that the spring hooks into. Now that there's no longer spring tension on the adjustment, we can unscrew the threaded rod from the nylon adjustment nut. If your machine is quite old, the nylon adjustment nut could be loaded with grit, and this could be difficult to turn by hand. Use a vice grip to be able to have a better, more secure hold on the threaded rod. When preparing the threaded rod, first place a hardened washer on the threaded rod, then the blue plastic bearing, and then another hardened washer. Then you have the cotter pin last. Notice here on the nylon adjustment nut we have a rounded corner. That rounded corner is what rubs against the motor bracket and has to be facing upward. We will now thread the threaded rod into the nylon adjustment nut up through the bottom of the machine as shown. Here you can see where the nylon adjustment nut is riding and pushing up against the motor bracket. This is what adjusts the grinding wheel. Now we can reattach the spring to the motor bracket, hooking the spring into the small hole in the corner of the motor bracket. This is what puts downforce on the adjustment. Now for installing the thrust bearing, we'll do it just like the bottom. Hardened washer, bearing, another hardened washer. Then take one of the nuts and put it on just finger tight, making sure that the threaded rod is flush to the bottom of the machine, pushed all the way up. When attaching the crank handle, it's important that you locate the flat portion of the threaded rod to clamp the set screw down on the flat. Use the crank handle and one wrench to snug the first nut down to set the spacing. Then take both wrenches and jam the two nuts together on each other. Use a needle nose pliers to bend each wing of the cotter pin to secure it. Here now we can test the new adjustment assembly. There should be resistance, but it should be easy to rotate the crank handle. After testing, We will continue by installing the grinding wheel, the front Lexan guard, the rear cover, and finally the grit guard. We will finish by lowering the grinding wheel down just before it contacts the work table so that the MAG-9000 is set up to sharpen blades at 30 degrees.
And that concludes our video for replacing the adjustment assembly in a MAG-9000. Again, if you need any help, certainly feel free to call us at 1-800-328-1110, and all parts are available at Magna-Matic.com. Thank you for watching.